like that intro music?
Yeah.
It's a little loud.
It's good.
I figure nice and upbeat, like us. I think this should be the music we play when you come up to the pulpit on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, it could be like one of those guys that kind of flies in.
Anyway, I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I was going to share, you were talking about family a little bit and things happening. And my second oldest son, Benjamin, got engaged this past week.
Yeah, exciting.
And it is. And so there was, but it was really interesting. I was talking to someone, I stopped by a business earlier today, talking with someone, and I mentioned to them, and then she knows Ben. She's met him. He's done work at her house in lawn care. And I mentioned that my second oldest son, my son Benjamin got engaged, and you could tell the look on her face, like, because she knows Ben. He's 19, right? And I saw it, and so here's the thing. I decided to, and this is not what we're going to talk about this morning, but I thought it would it'd be something interesting to. Because it's right on it's something that I'm thinking about, and I want to always express to people opinions and views that I think are important, especially when they're counterculture. And I knew that's what I was getting into when I saw her face when I said my 19-year-old just got engaged. Is this, and she's an older woman, and I thought, and I actually said to her, I said, Donnie, I see your face. Sorry, her name's Donnie. I said, the face you're making. I know that's a little shocking to hear about a 19-year-old getting engaged, but that's just culture. That's just our paradigm, our current modern paradigm. And I said, and the truth is, I'm teaching my kids to reject it a little bit, and I asked her, I said, when you were young, if you heard that your 19-year-old cousin, sister, friend, neighbor got engaged, it wouldn't even ruffle any feathers, or you wouldn't think twice about it. But it was interesting to see, and I kind of talked through it a little bit, but one of the things that I want to do in this podcast is make sure that we're always, I want to make sure that I'm always speaking into maybe paradigms that I think need to be challenged more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things that are, they just are the way they are, and maybe ask the question, well, how did they get there? How did that become the norm? How did that become our paradigm? And so I've taught my kids to do this, much to my own dismay sometimes, because they challenge my paradigms.
Yeah,
and that's never comfortable. But it is what it is. So anyway, we're going to talk. If you're good with it, we're going to talk a little bit about, and we mentioned it last time, routines, habits, patterns, discipline, those things that we do. In a rhythm, and anecdotally, I was Brandy and I got away this past weekend for just an evening at Virginia State Park, and it was awesome. It was really nice to get away, and we were taking a walk on the trails. One of the things I noticed, and I think this dovetails, one of the things I noticed as we're walking, I just happened to notice, I'm sure she didn't, but is that the rhythm of our stride kind of fell right into pace with each other. As we walked together, I noticed our feet hitting the ground at the same time, and this rhythm kind of taking shape, and we hit the same rhythm. And a couple things. First of all, I want to, and you can maybe talk about the rhythms of life, and like how routines and disciplines kind of fit into that. But do you think there's any importance, because you're a counselor and a pastor, and you've counseled married couples? Routines, habits, disciplines, patterns, is it important, or do you see, should we be aware of the patterns, routines, disciplines of maybe a potential spouse before we get married? And if we are married, is it something that we should be thinking about or trying to connect those at all? I mean, not to get too deep into it too quick.
Yeah.
But I figure that's something you see a lot.
Yeah, I jump back to your discussion of Ben, which I think is a fitting one because of our culture. You think there's not an expectation, well, really there's no expectation of marriage in our culture anymore. Marriage has really, in terms of the world's look at marriage, has really fallen apart.
Yeah.
In the U.S., in the West at least, it's kind of, what's the point of getting married anymore?
Yeah.
And a lot of young couples start out with that idea. There is what's the reason for this? Why do I need to do it? We can just live together.
Yeah, why bother?
Because there's no expectation or expectancy of, or generally not an expectancy of a lifetime together. And so you think of that.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's disposable.
Yeah.
Like other things. And you think of Ben's situation, which I think is going to be really unique for his age group. Maybe we recover some of that in time to come, but he definitely has the potential to reach his 50th wedding anniversary. He has the potential to reach a 75th wedding anniversary.
Used to be more common, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can remember celebrating my great-grandparents' 75th wedding anniversary because they were married at such a young age that they made it up into their 90s in order to be able to celebrate that with them. And what you were talking about, catching pace with someone, I think is important, because how do you know when you've established a habit or a discipline? You don't know the first day.
Right.
I'm going to work out today. I'm going to start today. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you know when that begins to affect you long term? Well, it's when you've done it today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And I think the exciting thing that a young couple getting married has is genuinely to look to a lifetime of spending together. I mean, it won't be that long before, and Ben and Ben's life, where he's going to have spent more time married than he will be unmarried, and that's going to keep replicating. The first 20 years.
By the time he's 40,
the next 20 years.
That's right. Right.
So,
and that's back to the routine thing, but and habits and patterns. They'll be establishing those together, which is probably in all honesty, one of the challenges. And I don't want to go too far down the young marriage, because I actually want to do a podcast. And I'd probably call it Get Married, Have Kids, Stay Married.
Yeah.
Right? The three things that we just do not see we didn't see in the millennials. The millennial generation, we're both Gen X. And so anyway, that aside, the whole routine, one of the issues I would imagine with young married couples, newly married couples, is the fact that they've gotten so ingrained in habits and routines that maybe are so disparate, right? That they're just very, very different, that it's difficult for them to kind of come to any kind of symbiosis, if that's the right word there. But real quick, routine. When you think about routines or habits or patterns, one of the things I think is most people would say that sounds boring, right? We like to think ourselves more interesting than that, right? Than settling into a groove. We like the idea of settling into a groove. What do you think about when you think about routines and habits? Like what are the areas of life that you consider that it's really important to establish routines?
I think there's multiple areas that we would think.
And do
about.
they coincide?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a mindset on some things. I am making a point to spend more time with younger men from the church. So in terms of maybe one-on-one meetings or taking a group out to dinner or something, to spend more time with younger men to talk about that. One of the things that I think distinguishes boys from men is discipline, and having a sense of discipline. What I see, and part of the reason why I've kind of maybe shifted a little bit in terms of ministry focus to think about that group, not to the detriment of young ladies or older people or whatever, but I think specifically young men aren't taught the idea, the concept of discipline in their life. Mm-hmm. And it certainly doesn't come natural. Our natural inclination is not to be disciplined people. And part of that is from observing people in 50s, 60s, 70s who never discipline themselves, as Paul says, discipline yourself for righteousness' sake, and have never found the place of discipline in their life or routine or habit that are positive, and end up under these, whatever you want to call them, bondages, bad habits, bad inclinations that at the latter part of their life begin to destroy their life. That pull apart marriages, pull apart friendships, pull apart, your financial underpinnings, other things that seem to plague. They don't necessarily come out and show in younger years, but they definitively come out as you're older. Just like, you are much more active than I am. I'm working at it, but it shows as you're getting older. It doesn't necessarily show when you're in your 20s and 30s.
Point. That's right.
It shows when you're, late 40s, 50s, 60s, the fact that you haven't been doing these things. That really extrapolates to other areas of life. Whether it's spiritual, whether it's your physical exercise or mental focus or other things.
Those are the three I was actually I was thinking: physical, mental, spiritual, and the things that it takes to maybe hone those. One of the things I was going to say, when you're talking about working with young men, why that's so important to help them establish good patterns and discipline young. And that's one of the things as I spoke to this person today about Ben, is I said, he's a man. Yeah. I can say that at 19. And the thing that makes the difference in my mind is he has learned maturity for me has associated with it disciplines, right? And so I see in him someone who works and works joyfully, enjoys to work, doesn't mind the idea of providing for family, can get up early, work all day. And I mean, I understand people say that's not life, working all day, but it really is truly, it's being fruitful. He's being fruitful with his time. He's gotten much, much better at disciplining his time. It used to be something he really struggled with. And I think what that is that's the maturity from boyhood to manhood. And the problem is, I think, and the reason why I'm really, glad to see you spend time with young men and help them kind of hone that, is because we culturally, I think, have allowed young men and young women as well, but men really seem to be suffering more from it, to remain in this adolescence or boyhood indefinitely. No. Well, it doesn't shock us when we hear about a 20-something or maybe even a 30-something man living at home with his parents working part-time. Mm-hmm. Not to be judgmental, but it's not the way it used to be, for sure. And I don't think if you were to ask them, hey, do you feel fulfilled in your life? Do you feel like what are your goals, aspirations, dreams, and how are you achieving those? I don't think you'd have a positive response from those people. I think, again, not to be judgmental, but yeah, I know. Treading lightly here.
Yeah. And again, I know we want to focus broader than Ben, but he is the thing in the moment. And
he's going to love hearing this.
I like thinking about, because a couple things that they did, he and his fiance, that I thought were really wise for a young couple, is before they ever got engaged, they asked, and I haven't asked him permission, to tell a story, but I think he'd be fine. They asked other couples what they thought, which I think was, one, a sign of maturity. And as a pastor, when I look at him as a person, one of the things that I shared with him was, you are the type that I know is going to provide for your family no matter what you have to do. Like, I see those qualities in you that no matter what happens, you're going to provide for your family. Now, you can't say that about every 19-year-old. So I do think we would be careful to say everybody should get married at 18, 19 years old, because there's some people who don't have. Agreed. And it's a maturity issue. It doesn't mean they won't mature into it. Right. But some people are just a little farther along than others who have already kind of captured that focus of, I'm going to do what is necessary in order to pull my life together, in order to keep things focused in the direction that they need to go. That's positive for me and positive for my family. And I think what our culture has created in some ways is this perpetual adolescence, which really, I'm not saying adolescence is necessarily, or that sense of adolescence is necessarily wrong, but adolescence did not used to be a stage of life
Right.
in antiquity.
Right.
You were a boy and then you became a man.
Right.
And it wasn't this season of sort of wandering and thinking. And our culture keeps wanting to expand that. And again, related to routine and discipline, the difference, at least from my vantage point of seeing someone moving from boyhood to manhood, is a willingness to take responsibility, a willingness to lead and to be disciplined in order to do what it takes to accomplish goals spiritually, goals mentally, goals for your family, goals for yourself that keep you focused
Right.
in a particular direction. And you and I are close in age, and I don't remember a lot of talk about that when I was growing up. You saw some men
Right.
who you could observe, but I don't remember like consciously thinking, "Oh, this guy's developed some really good habits that I want to mimic."
Right.
I've not.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but I think that is what was happening with what we often refer to as kind of the greatest generation.
Yeah.
They got married younger. They did what it took to support their family. Those who were following after the Lord, you saw a sense of godliness in them. And
I think what we saw too, I know what I saw men that I thought, wow, okay, I'd like to be more like that when I get that age. And so while I didn't necessarily say, oh wow, look at the habits that person has, I want to mimic that, I would look at the results and see a man that I thought was successful or in great shape or had a good family or was a good father or whatever. And then you notice, okay, what is it different about him? What does he do? What does he have? What are the things that he prioritizes that have made him what he is? And I think, so physically, for me, I think it's funny because it starts early, and when it doesn't, and this is one of the things that I think it's really important for people to know, that is, unless we really kind of take hold of this in our mind, we are not feeding a vacuum when we establish habits. We are, for the most part, trying to undo, especially when we get into our teenage and adult years, undo habits that are no longer sufficient for where we want to be or go, or where we'd like to be next year or 10 years from now. So we're trying to establish habits to overcome the habits we already have. I wake up at 10 a.m. every morning. That's a habit, right? I don't wake up at 10 a.m. every morning, but I would say that's a habit that needs to be undone. And most people that want to be successful, it's tough to be successful when you're, waking up at 10 a.m. every morning. So, we're not feeding a vacuum. We're actually trying to rip out old ones and put in new ones. And physically, that's tough. One of the things I said to my kids, it's funny. When I was trying to motivate myself to work out more or to be more physical, the more physical activity, and for me, it's always the mornings. It has to be the mornings. I have to start that. And we had a text string going with the family, and I just started trying to encourage them, and I would start just texting in the morning, hey, this is what I did. I did this many push-ups, right? To the whole family, and just to let them know, hey, I worked out this morning. There you go. Kind of challenge thrown out there, especially to my boys, right? And one of the things that I would do as well is say to them, came in this morning, I would come into my office before I did any kind of workout, but came in this morning, did not feel like working out, and pushed out this many push-ups, right?
That's a really good. You think?
Because that's the tough ones is let them know, hey, most mornings it really stinks, or a lot of mornings it really does. It just stinks. But on the physical side, for working, it's the same thing with the other disciplines as well, probably. But you just have to do it. And a lot of times one of the things I said to them one morning was, a lot of times just doing something is the bigger thing than doing something great. Just doing something, not doing nothing. Don't ever not do anything. Yeah. That's a lot of negatives there, but yeah.
Well, I forget the author's name. You'll remember it, but it's a really popular book right now, Atomic Habits, and he talks about those small little things that kind of can change your life over a period of time. And that's what I think is essential for discipline in any number of ways in our life, is being willing to, one, not simply get routinized. For instance, even in your exercise or other things. There's times where you want to increase the weight a little, or you want to increase the distance a little. And the same thing, I think we could say spiritually. There's times where you're doing it just to get through it. There's times where you're doing it because you're so full in your relationship with the Lord that you just want to dive deeper. You want more time with Him. You want, a different type of prayer life. And I do think that's seasons of time. We pass through ebbs and flows of time. I had someone said, talking about marriage, and said, marriage is not kind of like a pyramid where you're always drawing closer to one another. I mean, it kind of works that way, but in general, it's like an ebb and flow. There's times where you're working hard and she's working hard and you're kind of apart, but you come back together and you're kind of closer together for a season. And then there may be a time where there's something that comes up where you're kind of pulled in different directions for a little while. And I think we have to realize that, because sometimes people fall off the wagon with their habits and they think, well, I'm just not going to pick it back up. I'm not going to do it. Yep. And the sense that, okay, this was just that moment, but I've got to get back in and pursue. My father-in-law is very disciplined in his exercise habits, has been for quite a while, and he's 86. And so I don't know what his numbers are, but I mean, in his 80s, he was doing like 50 push-ups in the morning and 50 sit-ups, and then riding his exercise bike and that sort of thing. And his doctor has told him, the reason you're as healthy as you are is because you've chosen to exercise. Had you not done this, you'd have heart problems and other things much earlier in life. So it's not just like these habits are an end unto themselves. They're actually pushing towards long-term goals.
Yeah. And that's the thing for me, and I've said this to Brandy many times, is that for me, the reason I say this a lot, people say, why do you get up so early? And my answer is always the same. And it's always because I'm lazy. And they say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I say, well, if you knew me, it would, because I'm lazy. In my nature, I'm lazy. I'd prefer to stay in bed, but I've forced myself for the last 10, 15, 20 years to get, my alarm goes off at 4:30 and I may hit the snooze once or twice and then I'm up, right? And the reason why is because I know just if I didn't have that alarm telling me, hey, you need to get up, and if I didn't have something else saying, if you don't get up, in the back of my head, if you don't get up, you're not going to have a productive day. I'm just going to be lazy. That's going to be my nature. I'm going to fall into it. And so I force myself past my laziness. And now, granted, 10, 15, 20 years, it's much easier to get up early in the morning than it was 20 years ago.
Sure.
Right? But that's the reason why I do it. I do it because my nature is laziness, and I'm constantly pushing back against that. And I think that's probably the same with most of our disciplines, with spiritual ones and mental disciplines. And for me, I know if I do something physical, that usually will correlate to the other things too. Sitting down and reading my Bible. Once I feel like I've started to have a productive day because I've done something physical and I know that I've pushed past that point of no, my body telling me no, don't quit that, stop it. Once I've pushed past that and done something, then I feel like, oh, well, let me take on something else. Let me do more. And so it seems to weave together. The physical, the mental, the spiritual. When I'm successful in one, it usually means then the other ones are starting, as far as being disciplined, they start to come along.
Yeah, for sure. I also think the sense of accomplishment, of having accomplished something I set out to do and see it in real time happening is very motivating. Again, whether it's in any of those areas, and I think you're absolutely right that one of those areas impacts other areas of life, and so maybe it's important, for us to identify, the key areas to develop a sense of discipline or a sense of routine in, because on the other side of it, you think about our world around us and kind of casting a line to what we talked about last time. What does technology, again, not that it's completely negative, but generally what does technology, social media, and other things bring to us is it brings a mindlessness of wasting time.
Yeah.
Spending time doing things that don't really impact us, that cause us to sit and atrophy, essentially. instead of stimulating our mind, stimulating our body towards exercise, stimulating our spirit in ways that exalt and glorify the Lord. And so I think for our culture, pushing back more on the technology side of things, using it to help us be disciplined, and then as believers, certainly focusing our heart on ways that the Lord, we see in the Lord, we see in the Apostle Paul and his saying, bodily exercise profits little, but it does profit.
Right.
And in the long scheme of things, disciplining ourselves for godliness, those are difficult things to do in a world that's constantly flashing things around you and enticing you away from a focused discipline towards a particular goal.
And you use the word atrophy. It's interesting that one of the things you learn about astronauts when they go into space and they're in 0G environments is their muscles and bones atrophy. They actually start to die and deteriorate. And that's one of the things I think. Okay, so it's logical and it makes a lot of sense for us. Just because we've learned to do it, most of us have, is that when you want to build muscle, when you want to stay in shape, you present to yourself resistance, right? Whether it's lifting a heavy weight or running down the road, you are pushing against something and giving resistance to your muscles, and that builds them. So how then do we relate that to? And because if we don't, they atrophy. Our muscles will atrophy and they will deteriorate. Then how do we relate that to, or is it relatable to mental and spiritual matters as well? Do we need to present for ourselves resistance or difficulty or things that press against us to build mental muscles and spiritual muscles? Does that analogy hold?
Yes, I think Paul, as you're saying that, Paul talks about, he talks about tribulation and ultimately tribulation producing perseverance in us. Right. And so there is this production that happens from something pushing against us in an opposite way, but us pushing back against it.
Right.
To use it in a way that is for God's glory, which is Isaiah 60, 61. God is able to take those things that are negative and transform those into things that are positive for us. So, lifting heavy weights is tiresome over a time, but it benefits over time as well. Solitude can seem like a time waster. Taking time, I'm busy, I've got family, I've got work, I've got, personal things that need to get done. Well, taking an afternoon to spend time in the Lord's creation in solitude can seem like, man, this is a big time waster. You
think that's an important discipline?
Solitude?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
The Lord modeled it.
Yeah. Yeah, he got away.
I recently looked just on that, and I want to say it was like in the 45 to 50 range of mentions in the gospel of Jesus pulling away to a desolate place.
Yeah.
He went away from everything else in a desolate place in order to pray. And you think, if God himself modeled that to us.
Yeah. It's probably important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about how I'm thinking how often so in the mornings but I'm busy with work. In the mornings I'm in my office. I'm working, and you could think, oh, well, that's solitude, but not really. That's not really introspective, contemplative type solitude. It's not meditation. So I have to create that.
Yeah.
Even when I'm alone, I have to create that idea of, hey, I'm just going to spend time in silence. That's another part of it that's really difficult for me. And I think about that. I think about, when we spoke a little bit last time about just me having a difficult time with silence, right? Allowing someone to respond to a question that I asked. And a sales manager that I had we'll get back to that in a second, someone who taught me a lot about discipline. But I think about that silence, and it's not something that's really comfortable for me just naturally. And I think a lot of people don't really intentionally spend time in silence without, a screen talking to them or something in their ear. You mentioned about people on a college campus with earbuds in. Yeah. And so I think, that solitude, that silence, that allowing God to speak to us is probably one of those disciplines that we definitely neglect. And I think that's just not just for our spiritual connection to God, but mental health for sure. I would say, just peace. Yeah. Just that, yeah.
You think of so much noise around us,
everywhere.
We're in a political season, and there is so much noise competing for our attention. And last week, encouraging the church to kind of be off of social media,
right?
And it was and news and those sort of things. It was interesting. Some people who came up this past week,
I was going to ask you about feedback.
Yeah, and talked about it didn't really matter. All the things that they would have normally looked at, right. And I see it in my own life as well. What changed in my life other than that I was at more peace? I didn't have to think about, what was going on. And in fact, like last week was a pretty newsworthy week, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on. But, there was another attempted assassination of Trump on Monday. Right. There was Israel with
I didn't hear about it for days, actually. Yeah. Which is funny.
Yeah, and then Israel and the pagers and the walkie-talkies, again, major news things that are kind of escalating in our world. But if you didn't know, didn't have to think about those things, they didn't waste your mental space, you're actually a lot more at peace. I mean, I felt it because I wasn't trying to understand that or figure out what went on or anything. I just was out of it.
Well, I was going to bring up, and so it's a little different than just routines and habits, but Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of the things he talks about, and you mentioned it last week, which was this concept of these radiuses of like the things that are really important to us. All of us, the things that are closest to us, family, friends, our faith community, our businesses, employees, employers, and things like that, when we give up those social media things, those things don't suffer. We're still seeing our friends and family and faith community and all that. We don't really, when we're giving up the news cycles and the social media, those things stay intact. It's the other stuff that doesn't really matter on those outer radiuses of the things that we shouldn't even be spending a whole lot of time and energy on, that those go away.
And you're more present.
And the noise goes away. Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I think is really important about that. When you take that noise away, you're more present with those fears that you're talking about.
Who do you have a model? I was going to say there's one person in particular in my work environment that I remember taught me discipline, because I looked at his life. I said, wow, this guy is just. Do you remember anyone in particular in your life that really helped you understand the importance of creating those? And it's funny, when I remember when we were parenting young children, they said, it was either a book or someone probably a book, because we didn't really listen to a whole lot of podcasts back then, but creating walls for our young children. And those walls had to be pretty firm and close, because as walls of discipline, of understanding where the limitations of their behavior were. Like, okay, you can do that, you can't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And it's a lot of when they're young. At some point in time, when we turn into men and women, we have to learn to have our own walls. Our fathers, mothers, teachers, their walls have been removed, and we have to understand, okay, these are our own. This is how I can discipline my own behaviors, thought patterns. Who do you in your life look back to and say, this is someone who really taught me what discipline looked like?
Really good question. So I had a pastor who was a mentor to me. We didn't use that term then, certainly, but he
role model.
Yeah, really role model, and took me under his wing. Now that was particularly in one area, so I wouldn't say he wasn't really disciplined in the physical area of life, but was disciplined in other areas. And so I really learned from him a lot in terms of disciplines of prayer, disciplines of study. I saw it I would say my perception of what it means to be a person of discipline came from observing different people, probably more of an eclectic mix than one person particularly.
Right.
One of the things I've tried to impute to my boys as we kind of have a sort of a beginning path to manhood, as I think and you may do this as well, I think, is you take your boys away and you talk to them about some things, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father, in that 11, 12, 13-ish year old range. And one of the things that I tried to impress upon them at that time is to be a man means you're leading and you're disciplined and you're focused. And so the Apostle Paul says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I talked like a child, I acted like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And it's an intentional walk. No, I don't expect them at 13 in a day or 14 in a day.
That sounds like a bumper sticker. Put away childish things. I think that'd be a really good message to today's society. Yeah, go ahead.
And you're right. I mean, because you have so many adults acting very childishly. They haven't put away childish things. And
people in traffic acting like kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
There's many spheres that we could look at. And, you think the discipline of eating proper things, eating right things, I mean, you can take it too far, but you've got to take it somewhere. If I'm always eating tasty cakes, the picture of Little Debbie and then they show the picture, this is Little Debbie in 40 years, Big Deborah,
Big Deborah, sure.
If you don't discipline yourself, you reap over time consequences. And so,
but even the eating thing. So just to go back to my original point is the best way to do that is to replace it with something good, because just telling yourself no. I mean, think about parenting. That's no fun being a parent. Just saying no, can't do that. And waiting for your child to do something else. No, not that. But instead of redirecting and say, no, look at this. Look, do that. Don't do that. It's okay to say don't do that. And that's one of the things I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, all of a sudden we're not allowed to tell people no. Yeah. Hopefully that's gone away. I don't know, but I had a sister-in-law that worked in childcare, and they couldn't say the word no. They literally could not say the word no. They had to redirect. And I'm thinking, what in the world? Anyway, that said, it's important to learn to tell ourselves no, but the best way is to redirect. Even ourselves, redirect yourself into something healthy.
Good point.
Take the thing that is going to have a negative effect, and then redirect yourself, your own cravings and desires, and redirect them into something good.
Yeah. So back to your original
tangent.
Back to your original question. That pastor who was a mentor to me, he literally kind of took me under his wing and helped me to see areas of life that were necessary to get to a goal. And I think that is the other thing that is important. There's some things, for instance, some people may not be very disciplined in their exercise or eating or other things until they get hit with a diagnosis that is very negative. And then it's like, okay, I'm changing all these things. And it's like, it's nothing to change them. They start right away. I've known people who've got a cancer diagnosis who's like, okay, I'm done smoking. I'm not going to do that anymore. I put them away. They never touch them again. No, they may have tried 40 times before and never been able to do it, but there was a goal now that was real and motivating that said, hey, I'm changing because I want to be able to live, or I want to be able to do this. And it's the same thing. I see it, spiritually. Sometimes people get at the bottom of the barrel of life and they realize the only way I'm going to get out of this is to change my pursuit of the Lord. And they are on top of it. They're in the Word. They're taking time. They're praying. They're focusing. The same thing I've seen with mental health as well, as people who say, no, I can't, that's not healthy for me. I can't do that. I can't be in that place. I can't go there. So I think having motivating goals, which is sort of what you were saying with the idea of redirecting. Yeah. Motivating goals that are very desirous and helpful for us. And I think as a dad, I have to do a better job of explaining to my children the motivating goals of disciplining for godliness, of keeping your body in right fashion, of allowing your mind to think about what Scripture would say, things that are good and beautiful and lovely. That's keeping your mental health as well.
For sure. One of the things I've been enjoying since losing my smartphone is reading. And I think, and so that is that's my mental weightlifting, not just reading. And I think that's another thing too, is someone might say, oh, I read a lot. Well, do you read things that are heavy, right? Do you do any, and that's me, I'm reading, and why I decided to pick up Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, which I don't even think I knew what I was picking up. It is heavy. It's really heavy lift. It's heavy mental lifting. And it's one of those things, and I want to read these. It's funny because I was an English major and I never read that.
I saw your daughter yesterday reading the Iliad.
Yeah, that's one of the things they read for school. Yeah. But those heavy things, doing the heavy lifting, and like, man, this is hard. I don't like reading this. And a discipline that I've picked up. And here's the other thing I was going to say. When you were talking about establishing these things that are good for you, and maybe putting aside the things that are not, it's also good to have the right role models. I get a little discouraged by the let's just say the person that was on when we were kids that would have been on the television at 7 a.m. Okay, we're gonna work out now, and like I can't remember that guy's name. There was a guy that was on, and like with a fit body and doing and looking like it's no problem at all to do the workout that they're doing. Like that can be a little discouraging in all honesty. People can look at that person and say, "Well, I'm never gonna get there."
You made me think of Richard Simmons.
Richard Simmons. No, it was this other guy, and I can't remember his name. He was this big guy with curly dark hair, and but anyway. All that said, and that's another thing too, is so, for example, when I first started realizing, at 40, I realized I was getting a little soft and I wanted to do something different. I started with something small and realized I'm not going to push out 100 push-ups like that, or I'm not going to run, 20 miles. So start small and don't shoot too high because you'll miss. You're going to miss when you shoot. And get discouraged. Right. And so, anyway, I think it's really important that we build little by little by little to those, and not get discouraged by looking at the wrong kinds of models, if you will.
Did you have that role model that you kind of look to at this point?
So it's been different over the years. The one person in particular that when I went into sales so I started delivering newspapers when I was 12 years old, and then delivered newspapers forever. And that was a great discipline, by the way. And the reason why I liked that, and the reason why I think that really instilled, for me, it was just because I wanted some money and I wanted to get a bike. I wanted to buy a bike at 12 years old, so I got a newspaper route. And well, guess what? The other kids, when we got home in the afternoons from school, got off the big yellow bus, I had a stack of newspapers waiting for me that I had to unstrap, put them in my bag, and carry them around the neighborhood, delivering them to the front doors. Wow. I earned enough money. I got a bike, and I thought, well, this is cool. What am I going to use my bike for? I'm going to deliver more newspapers and make more money, right? And so that was, but it was there every day, without fail, rain or shine. It was there, and that created in me, first of all, just kind of an understanding of, hey, if I do something valuable for all these people who want to read the news, in return, I am rewarded with money, and I can do things with that. So that was good. That was, for the business mind, that was a good thing. That taught me about value and merit-based pay and things like that. So when I got to a company in my 30s where I had to learn how to sell, and I'd never really sold before. There was a guy. He was the person that hired me. He was the person I reported to. And he was probably approaching 50 at the time. This guy was in incredible shape, ran. But one thing I noticed about him, he always beat me to work. Right? He was always there, and he'd close his door, and he would get on the. I had to make phone calls. Right? That's what I did. I had to call, and I would try to, as I really kind of got to learn how to do this selling thing, I'd try to scheme and figure out where. who to call, how to call. And I'd spend time doing that and figuring out exactly the right leads that I wanted to follow up on. And he was always, get on the phone and start calling. And what he realized was it's that discipline of just to get to the one person, you had to get past the 20, right? You had to get past the 20, and you're not going to get it past the 20 by just, sitting there without picking up the phone. And so I learned from him a lot of things. I learned then running. One time they said, "Hey, Toby, you want to," it was a running, there was a lot of runners in this. And that's, talk about discipline. Running really taught me a lot about just mentally, how to learn how to discipline my body and my mind. Running is more about, especially distance running, is more about just training your mind than it is your body. But they said, "Hey, you want to enter this race? We all do this every year." I'm like, "No, not a chance. Are you kidding? Why do I want to run? I used to do that when I wrestled to have to cut weight, and I have no desire." But I watch them and I think, man, this is something that, okay, I think I'll do this. And that was and he was a guy that, man, when I ran with him, and he was 10 years older than me, but he could just absolutely whoop me. And that was encouraging to me. I want to be more like that. So.
Yeah. Was that something that he had done like from childhood kind of, or was it something he had picked up later? Do you know?
I don't know. He was just this guy that I always assumed, and it's funny because I'm not sure where he picked it up. He wasn't military, so it wasn't one of those guys. He just realized that if he wanted to be successful in life, he was going to have to learn to say no to a lot of things and say yes to a few things. And he had just learned how to hone his body and his mind and his time. He was really good with his time. When a lot of salespeople were wasting their time, he just knew exactly what to do, and it was just doing the same things again and again. And that's the thing too. I was going to say that we can tend to take the word discipline, and when we say it, it has this that humdrum drag myself out of bed and put on the and that is part of it. Right. But there's real joy in that. There's real just knowing that I'm doing what it takes to get where I want to go.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Discipline, I think it frees you up to enjoy life in other ways, because if you're not disciplined, you're only taking things. Life is forming you. If you're not disciplined, whatever is around you, whatever. That's forming who you are. Someone who is disciplined is sort of taking life by the horns, and it's forming the direction that they want their life to go in. And you can't do that without discipline. You simply cannot go in a direction and form your life into what you desire it to be without taking life in hand and disciplining yourself for the goals that you have. Now, again, for believers, we wrap those goals up in the plan of God and the glorification of Jesus Christ, and that is important for us. But that is really a message out of Scripture, is this idea of discipline and focus, because there's a greater prize ahead of you. There's a greater goal ahead of you that we've not yet taken a hold of, but that we will take a hold of. And so we have to focus our attention towards those things. And so having the opportunity that guys at our age have to influence younger generation, just like happened in your life, I think is really important to help young men see the value of discipline as it relates to, and again, as you said, it has a negative connotation, but it is very much positive. You think just in terms of work, for those people who work regularly, there's a discipline just in getting up and going to work.
Yeah.
Because there's a reward to it.
Right.
If you don't work, you don't get a paycheck, you don't get the things that so there is a reward, and for people to say, I'm just not that kind of person. It's just you haven't valued the reward enough.
I've spoken to people before that have said, "Oh no, I enjoy, not even considering what I eat. I enjoy, just being lazy and sleeping in all the time." It's funny, I've told my kids over the years, and I've always had pushback. Listen, I'm telling you, it's just a truth of life. And I don't know why it's this way, but it is. You're always more productive if you go to bed earlier and get up earlier. Yes. And they're like, they push back. No, I'm really productive at night. I can get all kinds of work done at night. I'm like, okay. That it's and then sleep in the morning. And I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. I hear what you're saying. I just am telling you it's not the way we're wired. It just doesn't work that way. If you want to be productive, get up early. So I was going to say some of the things that we need to that we could give maybe some nuggets of how to discipline ourselves, or let's say we're speaking to a 20-something or even a teenager. How do you establish, or what are a few of the things that you would say? Make sure you're doing this, or start learning to do this in your life, and it will lead to more and more and more. We keep using the word discipline, but positive effects of I think about pruning, and it's a biblical concept too, of pruning a tree or pruning. I remember tomato plants. One year we had tomatoes and we fertilized, and these tomatoes, oh my goodness, they went everywhere. The vines went everywhere, and it produced all kinds of tomatoes that rotted on the vine. And when I talked to someone about it, they said, well, the reason why is because you didn't prune. You didn't direct the plant. And I thought, what? These things were crazy. They were everywhere. I thought that was going to be great. I thought it was going to be a great harvest. Yeah. Right? And it was not, because we didn't prune back the things that sapped all the energy from the plant. Right? And I think that's maybe what I'm asking is, what are some of the things that you would say to young people? Okay, make sure you're pruning this so you can redirect your energy into things that are productive. Yeah. Are there certain...
as people who are kind of middle-age-ish, we're thinking...
I'm going to live to be 150, so 75 okay, so is middle age. I'm kidding.
Third age-ish.
Right, sure. Yeah, that's right.
Those of us who are maybe a little more middle-aged, we tend to have... And I think this is built in from the Lord, but we tend to have a better grasp of our lack of longevity, in terms of there's going to be an end to this at some point. And so you kind of get in that legacy mode of what do I want to leave behind? Whereas when you're 20 years old, you're really not thinking so much about legacy. And again, why I think it's what God built into us is because a 20-year-old is willing to take a lot of risk. And that's good. Yeah. For a 20-year-old. It's good to take risks. It's good to, you can build a business, go bankrupt, and build another business, right, and before you're 30 years old.
Exactly.
You've got the opportunity to take a lot of risk without having a lot of loss necessarily. Whereas when you're mid-40s, 50s, 60s, the ability to take a big risk is less and less over time. So I think for a 20-year-old to think through, where do you want to be at 40 years old? Where do you want to be at 60 years old? Setting some sort of tangible goal, and then you sort of work backwards from that. So if I want to be healthy, I want to be able to go back to Ben at 19 years old. He could potentially have grandkids at 40. That's a potential for him.
Right.
That he could be.
That's not something
interacting.
You hear about anymore.
Yeah, no, you don't. But he's going to want to be active with his grandkids. Mm-hmm. He's going to, whenever that may, if the Lord blesses, and that would happen. So think, okay, I need to do certain things to be at that place. I want, Paul gives lists in Timothy and Titus, and Peter gives them also in 1 Peter of what it means to be an elder. He who desires to be an elder desires a good thing, the scripture says. So when I speak to young men, I share with them, your desire should be to be an elder in the church. So you need to work towards the goals of what it means to be an elder in the church. And so you take that goal and we work back from it. How do I get to what it means? I need to do A, B, C, and D. And I don't think a lot of people process life that way. We just kind of go as it comes. day by day, what this day happens, and I do this and do that. And we don't see the progression from point A to point B. And one of the things that I suggest to young men is keep a journal for
That's good.
where you want to be, but it also gives you a timeline of things that you've asked of the Lord or things that you want to do in your life. And then a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, you can look back and see the progression that you've made towards those things. And that in and of itself builds in a discipline to work towards something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I would say, just because it's become such a part of my routine, is make sure you get up early, work in. And so for me in the mornings, what's been really good for me in helping me, and the truth is, I think there's some relationship between my business. When I started my business 14 years ago, 13 years ago, there were some things that I didn't even know that I was undisciplined in, and it kind of came to fruition, in the first few years. But I think when I learned to start honing like my time and even my physical activity and things like that, everything else kind of started to fall into place because it just made more sense to me. And so what I would say to young men too is get up early, go to bed early enough where you can get up early, do some exercise. Doesn't have to be, don't do anything, go for a walk, for goodness sakes, and do it every day until one day you decide you want to just maybe run a little bit, or, do a few push-ups, do 10 push-ups. And then when you can do 15, do 15, and then do 20, and then do 100, and then do 200 or whatever. But start small, but do something, just do something. And the thing is, and we tend to, and now we've even done it with our media. We binge, we think, oh, I got to do everything and I got to do it all at once. When I'm going to go on a diet, I want to lose weight or get in shape, I'm going to just go. And that's just not the way to do it. That doesn't establish any kind of routine. It ruins it. It's going to ruin your routine. So start small, but do something, start with early mornings, pull your alarm clock back 10 minutes. And then 10 more minutes, and then 10 more minutes until you feel like, I can get a lot done with this time.
I think that's a great piece of advice in terms of the sleep habits and other things. And I think, studies back that up, certainly, that 7 to 8 hour sweet spot, whatever it is for some people maybe a little less. But to have it where you are up early. And the other thing about getting up early that I notice, I'm sure you notice, is it's quiet.
It's very quiet.
So
for sure.
That almost builds into your day, beginning it with a sense of solitude.
Yeah.
So,
well, cool. Next time I want to talk about, we'll decide. But I think the whole get married, have kids, stay married, maybe, or Gen Z, or there's actually another concept that I was thinking is just this. Disappearing shades of gray, I said. I think our culture, our world is kind of changing a lot right now, and it's becoming more and more clear that it's kind of a binary system. Our world is a very binary system. I think Scripture reveals that as well, but I think we're seeing it more and more, so we'll talk about that more next time. But there we go. There it is.
Sounds good.
Yep. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you.